recorded live.
Good evening. This is Genesis Science Fiction Radio. It is our BlackScienceFictionSociety.com service to you, the listening community. This evening, we are graced with the presence of Ceres Wright, who is our guest. We also have with us our usual peanut gallery, Wolfgang, and don't get Denise tonight. That's good. We haven't seen you lately. We have our admin here with us this evening, Jarvis. We have Thaddeus, who's in and out. I know he's cooking dinner, but he'll be here with us, I gather. And this first half of the show, of course, the first hour, is going to be our interview with our guest, Ceres Wright. The second half of the show will be forum, and the forum will be directed by the administrator, Jarvis, and I guess we're ready to get started. Kay, and the way that you have your name is Ceres Wright.
Ceres.
Could you tell us a little bit? Ceres or Ceres?
Ceres.
Ceres.
Yes.
Ceres. I'm thinking Ceres, the goddess.
Yes, she was the goddess of the harvest.
Yes. So I think, okay, Ceres, right. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, my father was in the Army, so we traveled quite a bit when I was young. I've lived in Germany and Korea, but I've lived most of my life in Maryland. Go Ravens! I went to school at the University of Maryland. I double majored in finance and economics and worked as a credit analyst for about 10 years. When I was pregnant with my son, I took a creative writing class, and I loved it. So when my job was going through layoffs, I applied for a job as a proofreader at a management consulting firm, and I got it. Then in 2005, I decided to write a book, but I didn't know how to write one. So I searched for a graduate writing program that allowed students to write science fiction, because that was my first love. And I found one at the Writing Popular Fiction program at Seton Hill University. So I wrote my thesis, my science fiction thesis, which is now about to be published in July, and the name of it is COG.
Did I keep out?
I'm sorry.
Ceres, I didn't hear you.
Hello?
Yes, Ceres, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the name of your thesis.
Oh, COG, C-O-G.
Okay. And this is this is going to be available as an academic piece, or is it going to be available generally?
Generally. It's a science fiction book.
Oh, fantastic. All right. We had the opportunity just to read through a little bit more of your background, starting out when you were young. And one of the things that you indicated was that your first memory was of watching Star Trek at the age of 3.
Yes.
And so you are, a hardcore science fiction fan from way back.
Exactly. I think Gene Roddenberry thought if you could grab the toddlers with the shirt colors of red and blue and yellow, you'd get them for life. That's what he did with me.
Excellent. So I know right now, we, of course, have had the opportunity to look at some of your work and your dossier of work. And I know you've done, as you said, you have a book, but you've also done some short stories. Is that correct?
Yes. I have a short story called Choices in Hazard Yet Forward, which is a collection of short stories written by alumni of Seton Hill in support of Donna Monroe, who is a fellow student who had breast cancer, and all the profits went to her treatment. I have a short story called The Haunting of M117 in Genesis, an anthology of Black science fiction, which is a publication of the Black Science Fiction Society. I have an article on cyberpunk in Many Genres, One Craft, which is a collection of how-to write articles written by published writers and edited by Heidi Ruby Miller and Dr. Mike Arnzen of Seton Hill. And I have a poem which was a finalist in the 2008 Riesling Anthology, which is a publication of the Science Fiction Poetry Association.
All right, and you indicated that it was nominated for a Riesling Award.
Yes, it was. The name of it was Doomed.
Okay. Now, with respect to that, the title Doomed, is this a post-apocalyptic vision or?
Well, it was sort of like a circle. It related slavery to how people with money treated slaves to how people with money will treat robots who would be a slave class in the future, and the similarities and how it's a circle.
Oh. And currently, you're indicating that you are in the process, that you have your book that is coming out. Are you in the process now of creating any other works in science fiction?
We've just started another book with a fellow Seton Hill student, Rachel Pruitt. It'll be a Arthurian cyberpunk, sort of a mix of Arthurian and cyberpunk together, which will be interesting.
Yeah. So with respect to your background, and you indicated that you, as most people we find who are in science fiction, not only have their creative side, but they also have a technical side. And your technical side, it seems, you have a background in, business economics. You have a background in editing. So when you were writing, when you started writing, how did all of your academic background come to the fore to assist you in what it was that you eventually produced as, your first work?
Well, my first work, I guess, as a writer, I was working as a credit analyst, and we were going through a lot of stress with the downsizing. And to deal with that stress, I wrote a short story about our little group in the company, in the insurance company, and I took it to outer space. So it was sort of like my work and my training coalesced into putting it into a story and setting it in a science fiction setting. And then my writing just went on from there. And then I discovered cyberpunk, which is very action-oriented, and it's very concise writing. There's not pages and pages of descriptive narrative. It's very tight, which I like.
So in addition to the before you got into the cyberpunk genre, what was it that interested you prior to that you compared cyberpunk to and knew that this was the way that you wanted to express yourself as a writer?
Oh, I've read, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, a Foundation trilogy, Something Wicked This Way Comes, Ray Bradbury, all the classic writers.
Right. And of all of those writers that you have read in the past, which ones do you think have had the most effect on, two things. One, your outlook in the world, and two, your actual writing?
I would say my actual writing was William Gibson, who wrote Neuromancer. He wrote it in 1984, but I didn't discover it until 2004. But I was just entranced with the way he wrote, his style. Like I said, it was very tight, and there was lots of action. My outlook, I try to have an optimistic outlook, like Star Trek. Even though cyberpunk is largely dystopian, I like to have a dystopia with a happy ending, if that makes any sense.
Well, no, that makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. Currently, it's the Black Science Fiction Society, and it is a Black Science Fiction Society. It's one of the focuses that we have is on the Black creators and the Black characters in the genre. So with respect to what it is that you are writing, do you find that you are writing with Black characters in the lead, or are your characters varied, or robots, or what are you find, or do you find a neutral character to be a better, a vehicle to express your particular views through your science fiction writing?
The protagonist of my book is black. Her family is black. Her family owns a wireless hologram company. She has a brother, a father. Her mother passed away. Um, but it is a black family. They are antagonists, both antagonists and protagonists. Um, there is someone who is biracial, her a significant other in the story, but it's majority African American.
And do you find that at this juncture, the writing now, I mean, I know for myself, I have seen, especially the BSFS, more black writers actually writing black characters, not feeling the necessity to tell our stories through the eyes of others or having the other person explaining what it is that they see of us. And I guess maybe that comes from, and you can correct me in your situation, but it comes from the desire to reach out to our own community with our writing, as well as reaching out to the broader community. When you are writing for the broader community in the sense of saying, this is how I see this as a person of color, as a black person, a black woman, this is how I see the world, and I'm trying to show you what that is to the broader community? Or are you speaking to our community saying, well, you already know this, so, I'm putting it out there for you because you already understand what it is I'm saying?
I'm writing to both of them. I mean, I write what I want to write, but I try to relate it to my audience. I don't know what exactly they know about black culture. I cannot assume it. So I write from my perspective what I know, and I don't feel I have to explain it. If I put it in a story, as they say, show, don't tell. So, if the way the characters speak or the situations that they're in, a reader should be able to surmise the culture from that. And if they need more, then they can go to extraneous sources.
Right.
But I'm not trying to teach my readers about black culture. I'm just trying to show it from my perspective.
Now, in some of the information that we got from you or about you, it indicates here that you learned about the world of Star Trek RPG's tech space and became enmeshed in that. So could you just give us a little background on how it was that you started getting involved in RPGs?
I was a research assistant for a management consulting firm, and I had some downtime, and I was just, playing on the Internet, and I found a Star Trek-based role-playing game, and I joined it, and I started writing this character as part of a larger storyline, and I just loved it. And I said, this is fantastic. It helps me write practically on an everyday basis. But it's not a lot, but it keeps my skills up. It keeps me sharp because I have to know where the story's going. I have to think about the other characters, which is what you need to do as a writer. You have to always have the other characters, their motivations, and that's going to drive your storyline. And if you do that every day, then it just makes you a better writer.
So right now, are you at all interested in the role-playing games? Are you currently in the process of even moving into that media? Because I've seen several people who have moved from they have their own characters, own scenarios, worlds, and are branching out into taking their worlds into that milieu, to the role-playing games context. Is that something that you might consider because of your background in role-playing games?
Well, I think I would first have to have a larger body of work in order to create a universe, in order to have a role-playing game where other people could come in and create their own characters within my universe. Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely.
Okay. Actually, I hadn't thought about that, but that would be very interesting.
Yeah. And, I guess one of the things I asked you earlier is about the type of influences that you've had with respect to writers. But in the broader sense, how have you been influenced by family, friends, mentors in your writing?
Oh, I had two mentors at Seton Hill University, Timon Zizaius and Stephen Pizix, who I think wrote the latest Battlestar Galactica book. They were very instrumental in the development of my writing. Show, don't tell, no info dumps, looks, don't filter your writing through, quote unquote, she felt or she saw. So many things. I can't even name them all, but the whole process really improved my writing. I would highly recommend this program to anyone who's seeking to write a genre book.
And with respect to your background, again, as a professional, how have your family and friends reacted to you actually feeding that creative side of you?
Oh, everyone's been very supportive. My father's a writer as well. He's writing our family history, actually. He's been working on it for about 20 years. But he was just delighted when I told him that I was going to be published. He's also a poet, and he came with me, actually, to a poetry panel at Frostburg State University, and I think he pretty much took over the panel because he's a very good poet.
Wow.
And my brother in Germany said that he would distribute my book over there when it was published, so I have both a domestic audience and an international audience.
And on that issue regarding an audience, how have you found that it best to get out to your audience? Who is it that, number one, you've identified as your demographic, and how best have you been able to reach that demographic?
Well, the thing about science fiction is that it's so inclusive, and there's, with the cons, there's people who love comic books, there's people who love science fiction, there's people who love fantasy, and the coalescence of all those fans, you can't really say, well, this one niche is my demographic, because science fiction is so inclusive nowadays, which is great. I think that's fantastic. And, I just look forward to interacting with them, going to cons and meeting fans. My book will be coming out at Confluence in Pittsburgh in July, and I'm looking very forward to that. I'm on Facebook, so I interact with my fans every day, co-writers, co-artists, and I have a blog, which I need to update because I'm not very good at that, but I do have a website.
I hope that all these things that we'll have an opportunity to get this information regarding all your contact information, where it is that we're going to be able to see you next at Confluence in Pittsburgh, that we will know when it is that you will be launching your book such as available online, and when it is that you're going to be traveling anywhere else, in order to support your book, so that the rest of us will be SFS, if you happen to be in our neck of the woods, that we'll be able to come in and visit you wherever it is that you are traveling.
Yes, you can go to my website at www.cereswright.com, and information will be up there.
All right, fantastic. We appreciate that. And I know that we talked about your issues of poetry, your short stories, and now your novel. But in the process of writing, which form do you find is, most expressive for you? Have you found writing the novel has been so far the pinnacle of your work, or do you find quickness of a short story, or I guess the movement, lyric movement of poetry? And which of those do you have a preference for? If there is no preference, how is it they each separately feed the different parts of you creatively?
Well, my poem, I'm not really a poet, but I was sitting down one day and this poem just popped in my head, so I wrote it and I submitted it to Starline, which is a publication of the Science Fiction Poetry Association. It was accepted, and I was shocked. And then when I got nominated for the Riesling Award, I was even more pleasantly surprised. But that's the only poem that I have published. I do love the form of the short story because it is quick and very tight. But it's hard to write a bunch of short stories and sell them as a one-author anthology. So I think the novel is more marketable, but it does require more time and investment of you as a writer.
Mm-hmm. And with your background, if it's in economics and in the business, have you found that to be useful to you in that part of the writing career, or do you hand those duties over to someone else so that you can remain purely in the creative mode?
No, I can read a contract. I know finance, and I'm grateful that I have been working as a financier so that I can understand contracts, and when the talk comes to money, that I'm able to participate in it. And I don't have to depend on an agent or my publisher. And, I think it also informs my writing. I'm also working on another book. It's about a group of lenders to colonies, new colonies, that want to build infrastructure, and they need funding for it. So they will go to the new colony and assess their situation. So I'm able to use my background in order to inform that storyline. So, no, it's been very helpful.
So your lenders are good guys or the bad guys, or a mixture of both?
A mixture of both. I think we all are, deep down.
Mm-hmm. And in this book that you're writing now, is this a collaboration, or is this the next work that you have coming out, rolling out after the one that you are launching this year?
Yes, it will be coming out later, much later. I've just started the outline now, so it'll be a little while.
In an intervening period, do you foresee coming out with any more short stories, or will the content that you are putting out between now and then be focused on the book that you have coming out in July?
The book that I have coming out in July, COG, and the Arthurian cyberpunk book that I'm also working on. But I may give a preview of the new stuff once I get more developed with that.
We're hoping that you're going to post it first at BSFS.
Oh, excellent! Yes.
That would be fantastic. Now, right now,
I'm so grateful for Jarvis starting BSFS because it's really provided a venue for Black people who love science fiction to come together and discuss it.
Absolutely. Well, right now we're at about 25 minutes in, and this is a portion of the program. I know I've kind of COG the beginning of the interview process. We have another half hour before we go over to forum. So I would invite those who are currently in the chat room who have questions to post them so that I can pose them, or for those of Jarvis, if you so desire, to unmute people so they can come in and ask their questions as well. So I know someone asked early on when we were going through the first portion of your interview, I gather when you were speaking in terms of the protagonist in your novel, the ones who were the family that owned this, the company, whether or not they were, what portion of diaspora were they? Were they American, Caribbean, Brazilian? And I guess that was related to the family that you indicated was the focus in the story.
They are African American.
And does your story take place in a far future, alternate reality, near future?
It's near future. Most cyberpunk takes place in near future, although it's evolved now. Some of the new cyberpunk is evolving to take place in far future when we're off planet, have colonies, especially Richard K. Morgan.
And when you write, I mean, do you foresee taking that trek, going off-world, or do you still feel that the cyberpunk genre is, I guess, more, I don't know what I'll say properly, or more accessible in the near future that's on Earth?
I think it stretches my mind as a writer to take cyberpunk tropes and stretch them into the far future onto distant planets. It would still have some of the tropes of cyberpunk, like a dystopia and the alienated anti-hero. Information theoretic complexity, which is the tightness of the language. The decline of the nation state, where state borders are flexible, that don't exist at all because of the multinational corporations. They want to eliminate the middleman for trade, deal directly with the customers. Things like that. And also traditional science fiction tropes of, space travel, time travel, teleportation, instant communication.
So,
I mean, there's so many storylines that you could write.
Yeah. And do you see those issues, those things that we went through a long list there, how it is that, African Americans, people of color, how our approaches to those things? Because I know one of the big issues that we have is, black people, is when we're watching a lot of science fiction and we don't see ourselves. The far-off future or distant future, where somehow we're a little bit absent. So do you find that there are more black people who are writing in the cyberpunk genre, and or do you find that more Anglos who are writing in those genres are becoming more inclusive?
I think the Anglos are starting to become more inclusive. I haven't seen many black cyberpunk writers. They are becoming inclusive on television as well, but it's very rare that you'll find a black protagonist who is the lead in a science fiction series. But because of the proliferation of black writers through BSFS and other venues, I think it'll be more prevalent in the future. At least I certainly hope so. And BSFS is starting to generate its own content, its own movies, cartoons, books, which is, I'm elated about that. And big props to Jarvis for starting it.
Also, we were somewhere in one of the lines it indicated that you are one of the editors of the Genesis anthology.
Yes, the first edition I did edit it, and I had a short story in it. And it was quite interesting, and I didn't know there were so many black writers, and they were so good, and I was so impressed, and I was so proud to be a part of that.
Fantastic. There was a question that came in, and the question was, are your kids interested in writing now?
No. My son is a musician. Well, he writes raps, actually. He'll write raps, and he'll write some drum solos because he was in the drum line in his high school band. My daughter's only 15, and she's more into Twitter and Instagram. Mm-hmm. So she can write pretty well, but she doesn't really like it, which is actually how I was when I was younger. I could write well, but I didn't really like it until I got older. Mm-hmm. So that may be a pattern.
So with respect to your father and his writing, and not just writing your family history, and also being a poet, did he have any interest in the science fiction genre as you did, or is this something that you just kind of singularly had an interest in as you were growing up?
Well, he was the one who asked me if I wanted to watch Star Trek when I was 3. I think he has a passing interest in it, but certainly not to the level that I was. I mean, I watched Star Trek, my entire life. I remember when I was in college, the dining room would close at 7, and Star Trek came on at 6. So I would watch it, and in those 5 minutes that after it ended and the 7 o'clock show began, I would run down to the dining room. But I had to watch Star Trek every day.
And the question also asks you, what books really do it for you? What is it that, when you read, just kind of blew you away? And I know you mentioned Neuromancer, but is there anything else that really was life-changing, thought-altering when you read it?
I would think Noir by K.W. Jeter, who's also written some Blade Runner books. My favorite movie is Blade Runner. I think that was the progenitor of cyberpunk movies. In fact, when William Gibson went to go see Blade Runner, he came out depressed because he thought that his idea of this cyberpunk dystopia had already been put on the screen, and that Ridley Scott had just captured all the essence of cyberpunk. But as we know, there was always a market for both film and books. But K.W. Jeter, Noir was very atmospheric. It was very cyberpunk. It was very tight. It had an effect on me. Yeah, it definitely.
Well, seems it obviously has, because that's one thing it seems that you're very focused on, that you like the tight writing, action, not, I guess not a lot of narrative or extended narrative.
Yes.
And
I was reading a Ray Bradbury short story, and there was pages and pages of descriptive narrative, and I just got to the point where I just went ahead and skipped to the dialogue because I wanted to get to the action.
So what is it that you like most about your profession, and what is it you like the least?
The most I like, I love words and working with words and sentences and writing and editing, and I'm a grammar Nazi, so doing that I love. What I like least about it is, I guess, the isolation, because when you're an editor, you sort of have to close your door and have it quiet, and you don't really interact with people a lot. So sometimes I have to force myself to come out and talk to other people.
And with respect to your writing currently, where it is that you are currently, do you see changes from where it was that you began?
Oh, definitely a lot of changes. I go back and I read what I've written years ago and I cringe. Writing is a process. As long as you keep practicing, keep writing, keep reading, that's very important as a writer, to get new ideas, see where the trends are going, not only in science fiction, but also in and fantasy and other genres, because there's now a mixture of it. You can have a book that's science fiction and fantasy. It has magic and science, and you can play with those, and I think that's fantastic. But if you're just writing in your own little corner, you're not going to know what's going on in the writing world.
And currently in your writing world, I know, again, you are it seems, focusing on the cyberpunk genre. What do you read outside of that? And how does it affect the way that you perceive writing in the genre that you've chosen?
Well, I'm an editor for a management consulting firm, and we have a contract with the National Eye Institute of the National Institutes of Health. They have a public education arm, the National Eye Health Education Program. So I read a lot of public education materials. We're trying to inform the public about eye disease, such as glaucoma, age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy. So I try to see science as something to help people, and you have to put it in a venue and a language that people will understand and adapt in their everyday life. You translate the bench science into usable science. And I think as a science fiction writer, when you're researching science and you have to translate it into something, into not only a story, but also perhaps something that people will think about, people can use it in their lives to improve the quality of their life.
Currently, you have several pieces of work that are extant at the moment. Do you foresee any of those being translated into another media, into audiobooks, into graphic novels, maybe film? Is that something that you're looking to in your writing, or are you a purist that the written word and you're gonna keep it as the written word and that's fine and perfect?
No, I would love to put my writing out into different media. I mean, I'm a visual person. Writing would be my primary channel, but other people are auditory. Maybe tactile, that would be fantastic if it was a game. Movies, I would love to write a script. Graphic novel, I've never written a graphic novel, but that's something I would also love to explore. So yes, I'm open to any type of media, any new media that's coming up that we haven't even thought about yet.
Absolutely. All right, well, I know that I'm looking here on my lines, and I guess, we've covered so much, everybody's kind of struck, so they don't have any questions, really. And so is there anything that you want to tell us about yourself that you think is, I guess, as a writer or as a person of color working through the writing profession, that something you think we should know?
I think somebody else had a question about a theme or a message that I wanted to get across. One theme that I use in my book is redemption. I mean, we all make mistakes. We learn from them. We can recover. We can fall and get up, which is pretty much something everyone can relate to. And Nicole Ryder, my protagonist, is an heiress who's a recovering addict who's suddenly shoved into a prominent position of responsibility and quickly shoved out. So she has to revisit old friends and make amends and move past that part of her life. And I think a lot of people try to move on from a place without addressing how they got there in the first place. So I try to deal with that aspect in my book. I'm sorry.
One question was, there's another question that's related to that, and it was, they asked you, is there a message in your novel that you want readers to grasp? And know you said the issue of redemption.
Right.
And is that the thing that you want to come across to readers, that issue of redemption?
That no matter what goes on in your life, that you can always recover from it somehow. You can get up. You can move on. Don't dwell on the past and let it bog you down. You're going to have to deal with it first, but once you do, then you can move past it.
Someone asked a really good question. And as an editor, do you have difficulty editing your own work? Do you have someone look at your work before publishing?
Oh, yes, you have to as a writer. I have to read my work over 3, 4, 5 times, and I'll still miss something. So someone else will have to edit it, a copy editor, publisher. In fact, the more people, experienced people who look at it, the better to me, because they may see a gap. Because as a writer, I'm assuming the reader may know something, in my own head. So someone else who reads it who doesn't quite understand, they'll ask questions, and I say, oh, okay, I'll need to, expand on that a little bit more.
The thing that I found was difficult is that when I have written something, I automatically presume that I've written what I think I wrote. So when I'm looking at the page, it may say something different, but since in my mind it said when I wrote it, I presumed that I had written what I wanted there, I will always see it as written correctly, even if it's wrong. Because in my mind, I know what it's supposed to say, and I'm reading it as being what it's supposed to say, not necessarily what it actually says.
Exactly.
So that's why, boy, you got to put it away, let other people look at it, because sometimes I have written something and thought, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. I'm supposed to cut, 20 pages. How can I possibly cut 20 pages out of this perfect thing? You put it away, and you come back, and you can saw that thing off with a saw and a hatchet, the stuff that you can throw away. What was I thinking? This is completely irrelevant. But at the time when you're writing it, everything seems so necessary.
Exactly.
But when you come back and you start thinking, oh, man, what in the world is this all about? This is a different issue. That could be in a different story completely. But, yeah, I'm one of those people that do a lot of self-editing. But when I was younger, I know I found it difficult to just take the work and put it away. And that's the thing. As I've gotten older, that's the thing that I can do now that I could not do when I was younger, which is write the thing and then put it away and look at it again with fresh eyes.
Right, because after you write it, you just want to put it out there and say, wow,
that's right.
Look what I did.
Yes. But that's hard. That thing, to take it and just put it away and give it a rest and then bring it back out, a few months later, take a look at it, and you think, oh, man, I was all over the place. And sometimes you look at things and say, oh, my gosh, I can't believe I wrote this. This is fantastic.
And that's the part you love, when you get to that part where you read it over and you love it and you're not cringing at it.
Yes, exactly. And there are 2 questions. One was, what was the hardest part of writing your book?
Well, I associate this book with moving because when I was writing my thesis, we moved into our townhouse, and then I graduated, and I was dealing with some hard issues in life, so I put it away. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to, because I had to deal with life. And then the publisher said, let me look at it. And I said, I haven't looked at this thing in ages, so I need some time. But now that I'm publishing it, I'm moving again. So it's been very hectic. And so I associate this book with moving. So hopefully it's a sign of moving into a better part, a less hectic phase of my life.
That's good. All right, and there's a question also. Is there a genre you feel you couldn't tackle?
I wouldn't say a genre, but I would say a topic would probably be child abuse, because I have children, and as a mother, that would just cut me to the core. I know as a writer you should probably explore that, but I don't know if I could go there. I might have to wait a while before I could go there.
There's a question, did you learn anything from writing your book? And what was it, if you did?
I learned, as you said, you need to put the book away after you've written it, because after I first put it away to deal with my life issues, and I came back and I read it, and I was cringing and cutting out a lot, and it used to be almost 400 pages, and I guess I must have cut about 100 pages out of it, because it was just stuff I added as filler, and it didn't really relate to the plot. So what I learned from writing this was that everything you write has to relate to the plot or the subplot and the motivations of the characters. The motivations of the characters will drive the plot. I think people make the mistake of trying to force characters into a plot, but you have to look at the character and plumb the depths of their motivations. What do they want? What's going to stop them? What's going to try to challenge them? What does the protagonist want? You know, and the protagonists always feel that they're the heroes from their perspective. So you have to give them a sense of, I'm right because, and you have to make their reasoning believable so that people can empathize with them. You know, even though they're wrong, the reader can understand why they're doing what they're doing.
Why, exactly. What their motivation is.
And that makes for a great, quote-unquote,
I've read one of our writers on here, BSFS, Valjean Jeffers' book, and one of it's the second Immortal of her Immortal series. And the thing that I took away from it the most, that she had a character who in the first book was this horrible villain. But in the second book, she explained his motivation. And it really added another dimension to what it was we were reading, to know why he was motivated to do what it was that he did. And it made it elevated everyone's purpose for knowing his motivation, instead of just being this one-dimensional bad guy. You know, he is someone who had hopes and dreams and desires and longings, fulfilled and unfulfilled. And I think that's what makes the book for your reader, that they, to some extent, can identify, even with the villains. And that's I think that's great that, you know, that's the thing that you explore in your writing. Right. And I guess because people could ask, if we're talking about your book, we talk about it in such an abstract, and we got, like, about 10 minutes before we move on. But I'd like to take that last 10 minutes, if you don't mind, talking about your two works that you have coming out. You know, tell us about the characters. You know, tell us about their motivation, what it is that they're seeking, and a little bit about the process you went through to develop those characters. So let's start with the one that's coming out in July, the one you're launching then. You know,
well, we have Will's Writer. He's the heir to the global wireless hologram company, and he's a prodigy. He's conducting his own Phase 1 clinical trials on victims, unsuspecting victims, in order to upload their personalities to a quantum computer and download them into other bodies. So he's looking to expand his creative abilities. Jaron is his father, who's head of the company. But Jaron just revealed that he has an illegitimate son named Param. And Wills is jealous because Param is older, and his father has made him a vice president in the company. So Wills is going to rebel against that. The protagonist is Nicole, who is Will's sister. Now, she's the artist of the family. She has a job as a holographic museum curator. But when her brother leaves town and her father falls into a coma, she's asked to head up the company. So she's being thrust into an environment that she doesn't really want to be in and she doesn't really know anything about. We also have Thea, who's a government agent. Wills has stolen information from her, and she wants it back, and she'll do anything to try to get it back. And she will chase after Nicole. Parham, who's the illegitimate son, is jealous of the company that his father and his brother have because he grew up poor. So he wants to get his. So he tries to go after Nicole as well to get her out the way so that he can take over the company. So I'm hoping the reader can identify each of their motivations and understand why they're doing what they're doing. And I want to make
COG. What
does
that refer to?
Cognition, which is the name of the server that the wireless hologram company runs on.
And one of the things that you indicated was that the brother, Will, was downloading people's, what is it? Is it their memories, their thought patterns, their personalities into a system that he can use to create holograms?
No, to download them into other bodies. Like, say, someone's in a coma.
Mm-hmm.
You could download a personality into there, wake them up, and they would be a different person.
Wow.
But they're learning that there's leakage from the original person, so he's going to start to try to clone bodies in order to have a clean slate to start from.
So, and is that something that is appropriate during that time or inappropriate, or what is
it's quite inappropriate, but he wants to try to make it, I guess, more palatable to the general public.
Oh.
It's a slow process.
Well, yeah, that's kind of mind-blowing. Take someone who's in a coma and then basically download someone else's personality into them.
Right.
That's kind of, that's rough. That's interesting. And, as far as the other one, the one that you're working on, the Arthurian cyberpunk that you're currently working on, who are we seeing as our protagonist, and what is this journey?
I'm not too far into that. The protagonist is Bo, who's a biracial computer programmer living in China. He is asked by a Chinese policeman to call this number. It sort of starts off mysterious. And it's a project that the Chinese government wants to work on, and they're trying to keep it hush-hush. So he's wading into something mysterious that he doesn't really know about yet. His motivation is also taking his mental abilities farther to the limit, to push himself to see what he can do, where he can go. And, of course,
but does he ever have, or do these characters then have any pushback with respect to morals, ethics, emotions, when they're trying to push themselves to the extreme of their, intellect?
Right. There's always going to be an ethical question about how far do you go, what line do you not cross, or will somebody push you over that line, and who's there to try and stop you?
Right. And in your book, in the novel, COG, is Nicole the fulcrum in this entire story? I mean, is she going to be, the person who, gives not everybody to come up, but it kind of balances them to the point where they get either what they need or understand that they're not going to get what they want.
Yes. Everybody is after her. She has to go to her gang leader X for help. She used to be addicted to drugs, and she lived on the street. And she lived with this gang leader, but she was given an ultimatum by her brother. So she came home, and she was in rehab, and she sobered up. But she never made amends with this gang leader. And when she has to go to him for help, of course he's going to be reluctant, and he's going to want her to do something for him in exchange for her help.
And the thing that he asks her to do for him in exchange for help, is it because he needs to have the thing done, or is it because he's hurt and wants her to pay?
I think it's both. It's to deal with a competitor, and instead of doing it himself, he's going to send her as sort of punishment and necessity in order to further his cause.
It sounds exciting. I'm really looking forward to reading it when it comes out.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed writing it.
And have your children read it yet?
No, not yet. Actually, I'm editing the formatted copy now, but when I'm done with that, then they can read it.
Yeah, so we do. Okay. And usually in your home or your friends, is there somebody that you look to as your touchstone, when you're reading, when you're writing and you want a reader, to look at it and tell you, is it going in the right direction, or is it hitting on, all the different points that you wanted to make? Is there somebody in particular that you go to for that?
Yes, actually my publisher, Heidi Ruby Miller of Dog Star Books, who's publishing my book. It's a science fiction imprint of Raw Dog Screaming Press, which is a small press in Bowie, Maryland. I went to school with her, and we instantly bonded. We were both born on the same day, so
wow.
We sort of think alike. She loves cyberpunk as well. So, yeah, I'll give her my stuff and say, please read it and let me know your thoughts. And she's a great writer herself, so that helps a lot.
That's fantastic. That is good. So I know right now that we're coming down to the last few minutes of this portion of the show. One of the issues that we have out there is we're getting ready to start the forum, and sometimes I guess we even ask our guests, is there something that you want to put out there in the forum, an issue that you would like to discuss in the next hour, about writing, about reading, about marketing? Is there anything in particular that you want to engage the remainder of the BSFS crew here with regard to?
Well, actually, we were just, before the show started, we were talking about Jimi Hendrix and music, and I couldn't participate because I didn't know anything about, well, not much about Jimi Hendrix, but I would love to hear artists' influence from not only books, but from music, movies, all forms of art, sculpture, paintings, and what kind of influence that has on any type of artistry.
All right. Our guest, Ceres, has spoken, and the issue for the forum this evening will be on influences. What is it that influences our writing? Is it, be it from music to visual art, to other writers? What is it that put us on the road to where it is that we are in writing, what is it we're writing, or what we are intending to write or wish that we could write? I think that's a fantastic topic. And right now, again, we're at the very end of the first hour, and I know that we will actually stop and put in a break eventually, but for station identification purposes, this is Genesis Science Fiction Radio, which is a service of BlackScienceFictionSociety.com. This is our February 1st, 2013 installment of the show, and our guest is Ceres Wright, or Ceres. Right. I will say that right.
You did fine.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Jarvis, I guess this is your show now. You want to tell us where you want to go from here? Oh, he's there. Okay. Well, I guess the lines are open, I guess, for everyone who cares to speak right now. But if everybody would just jump on in, if you want to, and kind of explain or discuss what it was that influenced you, inspired you, what music, art, architecture, to start or to finish, complete, or change something that you were writing. Wolfgang, I know you're unmuted.
Yes. By the way, it's Ceres, right?
Ceres.
Ceres. Hey, it's great to actually meet you vocally, I guess, if you call it.
Thank you, too.
We communicate enough on FB, so it's nice to actually hear you in the flesh, so to speak.
Oh, but, you too, yeah. A lot of people here on Facebook.
But as far as influences go, one of the things that I think really influenced me very strongly, I was coming off a mission from when I was in the service, and I spent 10 days in Bahrain, and there was this they were doing this archaeological rebuild of this old Moorish fort that they had that at one time was by the sea, but the desert had basically had reclaimed it. But they had a considerable portion of it rebuilt and dug out of the sand. And I was walking around it, and it was like, I had those moments that where it felt like I'd been there before, and I took tons of pictures, and it was it really helped. Having that experience really helped me when I started writing my first book, because I literally had a feel for the structure of the type of buildings and basically that kind of time frame that all that existed in the period that I was writing about.
Okay. Is it me, or did we get some cutout?
Oh, I don't know. I can't tell. I heard a lot of echo.
Yeah. No. Okay, yeah, I hear a little echo too.
I do hear an echo. I hear an echo on my end as well.
That echo's been going on for quite some time. I'm not sure where it's coming from. Somebody's mic is open, or somebody's speaker set is too close to their phone, or it could just be some of the wireless phones will occasionally cause feedback that causes that. Sometimes you just have to kind of grin bear it.
Yeah, usually I just hear that echo in my head when I'm alone, but this time I do hear it on the phone.
Usually I hear it when I'm talking on set. It's like I'll be talking to the crew, and there'll be this echo constantly going on. I'm like, what's going on? It's just that voice of authority thing, I guess.
Anywho.
Go on. Well, I mean, William, I don't know how long you've been here, but what was the issue that we decided to talk about in the forum is what influences art, architecture, music that we've had as writers that, has been formative in creating our creative process.
I heard that last part. One of the things that affects my writing is I enjoy jazz, and one of the reasons why I enjoy jazz is because there's a discipline to it that you don't find in any other style of music other than classical. And I like the concept of order. And I don't know if it shows in my writing, but for the first book, I was, I don't know what you would call it. I don't want to say anal. I was particular enough to want to try to do a flow chart of what I thought a plot should be, and from there I built a whole story. So I like Wolfgang's experience of having seen something at that kind of really low level, and then something that that wasn't live, but something that showed a history. And to get a sense of order out of that, I thought was pretty cool.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a wonderful experience. But you know, I've been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go other places, and not just really exotic places. I remember once when I was a kid, a real serious influence was going to the Guggenheim Museum in New York. And other than the fact of having a mad desire to ride a skateboard from the top of that thing to the bottom without breaking anything, it was just the mere space of that place, is inspiring. Let alone all the artwork and stuff that was in there.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I was in high school. I'm here in Chicago, and I lived in the neighborhood that had the University of Chicago, but more importantly, it had the Museum of Science and Industry. And on more than a couple occasions, some friends and I would go in the museum, and we would hide out until after the museum was closed. And being able to run around the Museum of Science and Industry and do those exhibits and almost get caught and then escape, but to be able to look at all of that science, technology, and things like that, I know it had a great influence on the way I write. I've been told that there's a lot of science and technology in what I write, and I try to make it as true as possible. So that's also a very important construct to me too. One of the things that I most resent about bad writing, especially bad writing and speculative fiction, is when somebody writes something that's so absurd it takes you out of the story. All of a sudden you're sitting there and going, no, you can't pull a tapeworm that's 35 feet out of one person, or whatever the case may be. And I know that some of the best speculative fiction and science fiction. Well, let's look at what's the guy who wrote Jurassic Park?
Oh yeah,
Michael Crichton.
Michael Crichton takes one speculative fictional idea or scientific principle, like being able to reconstruct dinosaur DNA, and then from there he writes his stories, or he wrote his stories. I don't imagine he's writing much now, but he wrote his stories up against current culture. And that also appealed to me, and it influenced my writing greatly, because I thought to myself, well, telling a story 3,000 years hence, or 1,000 years hence, or even 100 years hence is one way to go. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to write my speculative idea, my premise, which is that black folks got to the moon in the 1960s before Neil Armstrong did, and then extrapolate out. So in 2001 or 2003, when America discovered, and most specifically when white folks discovered that there were black folks on the backside of the moon, and they'd been there for 40 years already, what would that do to our culture today? What would happen today if all of a sudden somebody said, you know what, there's a whole bunch of black folks living on the backside of the moon? Well, what happens in 2013 when that happens? Who does what? How does a country respond? And that was, bless you, doing a construct like that was very appealing to me, because there are challenges. I mean, I think it makes it a lot harder because I have to work within the structure of what's possible today, and I don't want to do something. I don't want to inject something in my story, like, well, these black folks, they ended up with two heads or something, where somebody sits back and they go, this dude is crazy, and I spent good money on this book, which I'll never be able to get back, and I'll never be able to get back the time I wasted on this fool story. So that's important to me, that there's a consistency that's realistic, and a consistency that doesn't take somebody out of my story because it's so wild. And so those are the important things for me, constructing a story. I'm not sure what's going to happen later. I've got like 7 books in this whole series, so I'll be busy. But again, I want to write it in a way that people go, that's exactly what would happen. Oh, yeah, the Army would do that. Oh, yeah, the Daughters of the American Revolution, they'd act just like that. or whatever. And that, to me, making it plausible and making it consistent and making it realistic in a way that's not off-putting, I want to think that those are some of the keys to my success.
Yeah. Well, also, I mean, when you wrote this theme, Discovery, and I know you said that jazz has, been one of your issues, but also with respect to the art, in the museum, to say, is there anything in particular that grabbed you, that made you think, even in the back of your mind, planted a seed?
I'll tell you, when we sneaked in the museum, the coolest things that we did were like in the space pavilion. It was just getting started when I was in high school. I think it's the Henry Crown Center. Those affected me. They had a whole Navy exhibit. You know what? They even had a petroleum exhibit, and the science of petroleum and what they did with petroleum, which was turn it into, large molecule, synthetics and things like that, plastics, making space suits. All of those things affected me as a kid because I was kind of a nerdy little read science fiction since I was like 8 years old kind of kid. And then to go outside of the museum where they had a U-505 submarine and a Berlin pre-bullet train and things like that, and even an old steam engine, getting ready to play on that stuff till we almost got caught. All of those things were really cool because what they did was they fed the imagination. We'd get on that sub and we'd pretend we were actually sailors. And I think fertilizing an imagination with that kind of technology, they had a telephone exhibit, they had a computer exhibit. All of those things, those things were pretty cool to me. I really enjoyed those things, and I even enjoy them now. And one of the things that I'm very thankful for in my writing is I get to write about things that I do enjoy, things that I'm interested in. And it's the coolest thing for me when I speak to somebody who's read what I've written or who also is a kindred spirit in the same vein. I think if I were a teenager again, and somebody told me, hey, I got a book here about a colony on the moon that's super secret that has nothing but black folks in it, I would like to think that would be something that would be of interest to me. And, I don't know if I made a mistake or not putting, a scene in there that's not appropriate for younger teens, but still in all, the premise is good. And who knows, I think the thing that I fear is there will not be as many readers out there as time goes on as we have today. There were far more readers 10 years from now, or 10 years before, and 20 years. And when I was growing up, almost everybody used to read something. But it's not the same these days, And that's something that is of issue as well.
Cultural illiteracy does not necessarily mean there won't be more readers. It just means that we'll be more challenged to find ways to reach them, and it will require compelling stories to do so.
That's true. That's absolutely true. But, you still have to, you have schools out there that aren't teaching kids how to, they're not teaching penmanship anymore and things like that. And if people don't write, their gateway to reading is also stunted. So,
yeah, but I suspect, William, the future, as weird as it sounds, the future will look a lot like the past. It already is. For example, I'll give you a perfect example. You know that once upon a time, writers wrote serial stories. If you go back to the late 19th century, the Victorian era, there were quite a few writers. Matter of fact, a lot of the writers like Jules Verne's and those guys wrote many of their stories as serials, something that they would release when they had the opportunity or when they could find a publisher or when there was money for it. And some of them were so bad they actually ended up with the secret name Penny Dreadfuls, as stories just so awful that nobody wanted to read them in public. That didn't mean anybody didn't read them. It just meant nobody read them in public. I suspect that we will have a society of people who will eventually get tired of bad television, and they'll get tired of bad internet television, and they'll get tired of bad writing, and that there'll always be a market for someone who can craft a good story. And it may take a while for you to get seen, and it may take some time for you to get noticed, but I think if we just stay out there long enough, people will eventually show up at your door because they'll be hungry for something that is good.
Well, I'm not prone to argue with you about that, but when you look at what passes for common entertainment today, when you look at the things that are popular, let's look at. We've had this discussion on this show before about the popular books that are out there. Your 50 Shades of Grey, your Hunger Games, your TV shows, your Game of Thrones, your this, your that, and I'm not as hopeful as you are. I would like to believe that what you're postulating is going to come true because, of course, as a writer, I would like to see that. But also, as a member of this society, if people don't read, we don't get as good doctors. If people don't read, we don't get as good engineers. We don't get as good lots of things when people don't read. So it's more than just a selfish notion. It's where is our culture going? That's always a question that I have.
Well, I'll buy that. I'll agree with that. And when you're looking at growing up, I was one of those people who I grew up in New York, and we had the Bronx Museum of the Bronx Museum of Natural History in Manhattan. And it was at the time one of the greatest, bestest museums of its type. And the Hayden Planetarium, which still exists today and is the home of Neil deGrasse Tyson, everyone's favorite black super scientist, astrophysicist, and all-around media gadfly. And I love him. I love seeing him. Every time he shows up someplace, I get a warm feeling because that gave me the inspiration to always love science and science fiction. I think that as a whole, as long as they exist, we're going to keep a generation of somebody who wants to ask the question why. That's our real goal. Our real goal is to present people with the opportunity to ask why. Why does this happen? How could this happen? Would people really do this? And living in the world that we live in today, we have seen things that we have questioned and said, well, they'll never do that, and then they do. You look at Monsanto. No, they'll never engineer seeds that will die after they're propagating food because that would be ridiculous, except that they do. And so we used to say that these things couldn't happen, that companies would never be so short-sighted. Well, we're now living in a cyberpunk era. Ms. Ceres, we are kindred spirits because I also have followed cyberpunk way back in the day. I used to write a game called Cyberpunk 2020. And I've been a fan of the genre forever because I think it is one of the more true genres that promotes and talks to the idea of what's going to have to happen for people to make choices that are different than they're making today, that they're going to have to rise up against corporate power, and they're going to have to rise up against the idea of the domination of corporations, and they're going to have to do it soon because it's clear corporations are never going to give back any power you don't take from them. So cyberpunk might have arrived too early for a lot of people, but I'd say that the lessons of cyberpunk are now more than ever really appropriate. So you're not alone. There are lots of people out there who've done cyberpunk. I've been involved with it for 2 decades. I think it's one of those genres that just came at the wrong time, and if it had arrived today, it would be exploding right now. But it arrived 20 years earlier, and thus people were kind of peaceful and serene, and corporations kind of knew their place, but those days are gone now.
I agree. I think I'm muted, though.
Let me interject just for a second. I happen to be walking home, just about to walk into my little gangway here, and a rabbit runs in front of me here in Chicago. That's just wrong.
Why? That's nature. Nature's everywhere.
Yeah, well, you talk about it in the middle of the city. I'm just surprised a rat didn't eat it. Okay, that's all I got to say about that.
Please,
okay.
In my visiting one of my sisters in Cleveland, of all places. She lives where she lives is right by the lake. My mother and I just bought a bunch of food, for the family. We're going into her building, and we get out in the parking lot. Now, remember, this is an urban area. I look up, and I see a skunk. And I'm like, okay, all right, this is not good, but we can get around this. Now, remember, this is the winter. It's freezing cold out there. So I'm looking for a way to get around the skunk. Next thing I know, I look up, I see another skunk. And another one, and another one. It was like all of a sudden, I swear to God, it was like one of those old westerns, where suddenly you're surrounded by all these gunslingers. And my mom's like, well, what do we do? I said, we're going to stand here until these skunks decide to go on about this. That's what we're going to do.
I was so glad to do
that. And it didn't make things, what made matters worse, we had bags full of McDonald's, so, they were nice and hot, and the skunks could smell them. And they were looking, and I was like, man, this is not going to be good. But unfortunately, they went on about their business, and we went inside, and I was like...
Well, let's get this back on track.
Okay.
When we talk about what inspires us to create and to make, essentially anybody who writes a book, I think, is making an imaginary world. And what pushes your discipline? What pushes your buttons? What is it that makes you create and populate, a world that doesn't exist? And to make it, at the same time, your intent is to make it compelling enough so that other people want to get into your world and see what's going on. I think the worst example that we have in common culture recently is all of these poor people who want to go to the planet Pandora. These sick-ass, sad souls, if you ask me. But that's just my opinion. Who are depressed, who are suicidal, who are, in some ways so invested in common culture, a common cultural construct, that there they are. They want to be someplace else. And that, that's both. And I have to apologize. I shouldn't put it that way, because obviously people are hurting in a way that is unfortunate if that's what they're looking at. If they go, I want to be in Pandora, or the few black folks who told me, I want to be on the backside of the moon. So what is it? I think the abiding question for any writer, whether it's for comic books, short stories, or novels, is how do you build a compelling, abiding structure that people want to join you in? Because that's essentially what they're doing. They are getting into your head. They are getting into your world, your construct.
And we're assuming you mean not with schizophrenia, right?
Well, yeah, schizophrenics don't need anybody else, which is
right. I'm just saying. So we're assuming you're not a schizophrenic needing your own magical world, that you just happen to be sober enough to write down to share with other folk. Or are you?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So we know what's popular. Look how many people got into the Harry Potter series. Look how many people got into Star Wars. Look how many people have gotten into the various Star Trek franchises. People are drawn to things that speak to them. And so when you sit down and you've got a blank screen ahead of you or in front of you, or you have a blank, brand new legal pad in front of you, if you write longhand, from looking at that blank slate to actually creating something that's got the consistency and is compelling enough that other people want to join you, that is a big-ass jump. That's
but
huge span.
You don't approach it that way. I don't approach it that way. I am not writing for anyone. When I sit down to write, I do not attempt to write something that says, this will appeal to every single soul on the planet, because really, that's just That's just
well, that's not going to happen. I mean, that's not going to happen.
I'm writing for me. I'm writing a story I want to see. I'm looking for a story on TV, and I'm saying, boy, you know what I'd like to see right now? I'd like to see this, and I don't see it. And so when I don't see it, and I have time on my hands, me and my imaginary friends, we sit down and we create something that we want to see, and we hope it will be as interesting for others as it is for me. But I'm not writing for anybody else because it's too hard to figure out what people want. They don't know what they want from day to day. How in the hell am I supposed to figure it out?
Well, now let's calm down a little bit. Still, we all, yes, but even when you write for yourself, there's still a part of you. I mean, there's a part in all of us that would love to have other people see what we've done and want to share it, even with themselves, who want to put their, and when you talk about, well, I'm writing to fulfill a need that obviously that doesn't exist on television, or it's not available as a movie or a story or whatever, again, you're filling a need, you're creating, and even if you're writing just for yourself, you're still creating a construct for your story to live in, and there has to be some consistency. There has to be some, there has to be, it's like, we can't write about the Earth and pretend that there's no gravity. There has to be some parameters. There has to be something that makes sense to other people. Otherwise, what I said earlier was, if I create a world that's not very well populated, that when somebody reads it, they go, oh, that can't happen, and it takes them out of the story, then I've almost defeated my purpose.
Well, we're going to assume that everybody's writing with the goal to create a world that may look like ours, and it may not. But if it doesn't look like ours, then your goal as a storyteller is to help populate that world and make it real. Make it real enough that people will accept whatever it is that you've altered for the sake of your story, and make it so that people feel compelled to participate in it anyway. And I think that people who are looking for novelty, and I think that's the science fiction reader in general, the fantasy reader in general, they're looking for novelty, and it depends on their threshold for novelty as to whether, how far you can go before they say, well, that's just too far.
I agree, and that brings us right back to the beginning of the question that Penelope asked, which was, what drives that creativity? What's the basis for it? What's the structure? That's the question. How do people create that structure? What is it that drives them? And also, where's the discipline? What is it that you have to impose order on your world, otherwise it's nothing but chaos. And I've read some stories where they were nothing but chaos, and it was a little hard because, almost anything could go. So, I mean, back to what Penelope asked, what is it that drives, or what's the creative engine for creating the worlds, right?
For me,
right.
For me, the whole process is like being being an experienced drug dealer. It's like when I write my works, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to open this door and I'm going to basically tell an audience, hey man, check this out. For a few dollars, man, I can let you come to this world. It's really cool, man. You'll get in there and you're gonna dig it. And when they get there, I basically want to turn them out, man. I just want, I want to get them. I want to do them like that, the experience they had with Pandora. For me, I saw that film, and it was nice, but I didn't get all the press and junk, I mean, it was cool, but the thing is, but I get that vibe, you take the whole purpose for me is, other than to get the idea out of my head, is to take the audience somewhere that I know that they can't go, right? But I can show them this place, and I can make them want to go there, and then when the time comes again, when they're jonesing, like when they finish the book, and because I was the same way when I would read a book, I want to know, well, what happens next, and for me that's the whole hook is getting people to want to know what happened next. But the thing is, in on the same respect, I'm like, you know, I follow Thaddeus' vibe. I'm not really busting my butt trying to figure out how to do that for somebody else. My thing is to just tell the story, and you know, to make it interesting enough to where that, you know, that if I'm looking at it and I say, okay, this is, you know, this is this and this is that, and I can believe that, then I just leave it to the audience, you know, to take it up from there. But the main thing is, you know, is to get, you know, to get people on the hook, you know, to get them to read it, and to basically do the same thing in a story, whether it's a film or a book or whatever, and suspend their belief, you know, and just for a short while put them to write it well enough to where they actually feel that they are there, you know. That was the thing with was it not Pandora, but the movie Avatar, was, you know, the especially with the 3D experience, you know, it was so compelling that, you know, you got these people, like you were saying, that are so sick of soul that they you know, they marveled at this thing. But, you know, the reason, one of the main reasons it didn't do me like that, because I've seen those places like that on Earth. You know, not the floating mountains and stuff, but, you know, there are places, you know, on this planet that are very close, and in some respects better, you know. So, I mean, so I know they're out there, and I'm not freaking out, you know, for a movie to make, you know, to give me that experience. But now, on the other hand, the story was compelling enough that I'm like, okay, well, what happens next? You know, so that's, for me, that's the discipline, is to craft the story well enough so I get the audience to read through and then say, well, what happens next? And then it's on me to show them what happens next.
Avatar work because people are hungry. People are hungry for nature. Most people, you know, most of the human race lives in cities. They have no connection to nature. They don't see it. You know, they are afraid of it, and as a result, they are disconnected from nature. They see nature in pictures. They see nature on TV shows. They see nature as something they are not connected to. So Pandora spoke to that very clearly in its visual representations. You know, like I've traveled, you know, so I've been all over the world. So I've had an opportunity to see places in nature that are that awesome. And so for me, it didn't do that for me because I've seen the real thing. You didn't have to present me with a virtual representation. I was able to focus on the story and notice that I'd seen this story before. You know, Pocahontas, Fern Gully. I mean, you know, it was not Dances with Wolves. It was not a new story. It was the same old story, told again and again, just with better graphics. But because people were hungry for nature, for a connection to nature, this story works. People wanted to be connected to it. They wanted to see it. And the travesty of technology destroying nature, we are disconnected from it in this society. We don't see it, don't live with it. We enjoy our technology. We never ask the price of it. It's, you know, the idea that if you knew how they made sausages or frankfurters, you probably wouldn't eat them. Well, that's how iPods and every other piece of technology that we've used is. There is a price tag. We're just disconnected from it. So Avatar works because it takes advantage of a psychological limitation that is prevalent in our society. And so if you're thinking about writing, you might look at taking advantage of a blind spot like that and, you know, use it as a vehicle to help carry your story. God knows, plenty of writers do it.
Another thing that was a hook for Avatar was the whole going native thing. I mean, you know, that's a classic theme. You know, with it's particularly in like Polynesia and stuff. You know, when those British sailors and British and American sailors, for that matter, would get out to, you know, Hawaii and Tahiti and all those other places. You know, those guys, you know, after the constrictions of the ship they lived on and the constriction of the societies they lived in, you know, to go to a place where, you know, none of that crap really mattered except for what you personally were capable of doing and contributing. And then, of course, beautiful half-naked women, you know, didn't hurt either. But, you know, that appeal is still there. And like, you know, like Daddy was just saying, that's basically a blind spot, you know, because, you know, a lot of people were I was listening to, you know, folks that were talking about, you know, how they wanted to go to Pandora and they wanted to see the wonderful things, but they also were really attracted to the whole love story part of finding an innocent woman and, you know, and shedding their you know, their humanity to be something else, you know. And you know, and Thaddeus is right, you know. Dances with Wolves was the perfect example. In fact, I thought it was a remake, you know, of that show.
I think ultimately when we sit down and say we want to create, our goal is going to have to be, I would like us to not use such a simple trick. It's a trick. It's like a sleight of hand, that we are taking advantage of people's hunger for a particular lifestyle to create a story that appeals to that lifestyle. I mean, yeah, okay. So it can be done, but I would like to do more. I would like to not have it be a bit of sleight of hand, and instead to be telling a story that is really relevant, that is really necessary, that people really should hear, that people do need to hear, and that we don't just use the tricks, the things like Twilight, where we use what I call the empty protagonist to sell Twilight. The main character, the girl, Bella, she has no personality. If you read the book, you'll discover that not only does she have no personality, that she is basically designed to be a vessel for the reader to inhabit. The empty protagonist is a trick. The book was not good. The story was not good. It was simply written around the idea that young girls are looking for someone to be that perfect knight in shining armor, and it takes advantage of that vacuum, and people ate it up. And this is a trick. This is not writing. This is, again, a form of sleight of hand. I don't want to do that. I want to create characters that you either love or hate, despise, or think they are wonderful, or want them to die as soon as humanly possible. And I want you to have that feeling because I created something that was already full, not something that I'm hoping that you will find a weakness in yourself and then populate that character with yourself. That, to me, is...
Okay, all right, that's all very fine and good. But ultimately, I don't care what anybody says. Ultimately, we want acceptance, and we want acceptance in two ways. We want critical acclaim, and we want to have some financial acceptance, some financial success to indicate that the worlds we created were worthy, were interesting, and obviously that they appealed to somebody else. So when you talk about constructing a story, when you talk about writing, you know, if anybody says to me, you know, that those two things don't matter, okay, fine. I guess you're going to write yourself a journal and shut the hell up. I don't want to hear about it. But, okay, yeah, you go ahead, do your diary, because that's the style of writing. So we all would like to have critical acclaim. I don't care what anybody says. If Thaddeus, you want it, I want it, we all want it, because you know we want to communicate, we want to convey ideas. And the bigger the ideas, the better. But here's the thing that we have to face up to. You look at the crap that is popular today, and you have to say to yourself, okay, what is it about our culture that makes that crap so compelling? What is it about Hunger Games that makes people, you know, salivate waiting for whatever that next chapter is? What is it about, like that, you know, the vampire stuff. You know, what is it about that all of a sudden America has embraced? You know, we could understand the Harry Potter thing. You know, everybody would like to regress back into childhood, have magic, be a hero, be worthy. I mean, that's wish fulfillment kind of writing. But let's talk about the bigger ideas. Let's talk about, you know, deprivations of society. Let's talk about fascism. Let's talk about you know, elitism. Let's talk about the excess of the moneyed elite. You know, if we want to talk about things like that, and we want other people to talk about them, we still have to write in a way that other people want to read our stuff. And I think that's a challenge. I think we all should agree that that's a challenge, because you know what? The best of stuff is probably not being read. I look at what's on the New York Times bestseller list. You know, I hate to say these words, so please, I apologize, and I feel like an awful person for saying it, and, you know, we beat it to death. But 50 Shades of Grey was terrible writing, and now people can't wait to see the movie. Okay, yes, I know sex was involved, and that's a lot of it. And I know it was kinky sex. So, again, you have your titillation factor is up another 50%. But it's still bad writing. And what does it convey to the larger culture? What does it convey to other people? Nothing. It's voyeurism. Okay, and that's what America is about. That's American culture in a nutshell. What's the most popular type of entertainment out there? Quote, reality, unquote, TV. Okay, and all of us on this show know that there's no reality in reality TV. That's just as staged as anything else. It's just cheap to make because you know what? Every knucklehead in America wants to be a star for 5 minutes. Okay, so how do you write a book that overcomes that threshold? How do you write a book that basically the dumbed down masses, the people who have had a generation of the ubiquity of the dumbing down of America, how do you get them to read your story? What's going to make your story so compelling that somebody who's a mouth-breathing, double-digit IQ, bad job-having person is going to want to go and spend whatever they have to spend to read your story? And that, I believe, is our biggest challenge. How do we get that to happen?
The way I've seen how you get around that, is the way I got introduced to comic. When I was reading comic books. I mean, comic books was my gateway drug to reading. I mean, let's face it. Back in the day, comic books, weren't necessarily intellectually, designed works, but they had a lot of themes in there that were. I mean, there were a lot of really intelligent themes that were going on in there. And, and in the mix of all that, Zap Pow and Boom and stuff that you would see in, in the action panels, there would be a lot of really, really deep stuff going on there. So I wanted to make sure that when I started writing my first book, the Tales and Long Road series, I made sure that, in between the action, I put those very things that you're talking about. I mean, even my main protagonist, he's not an anti-hero, but he's not really a hero either. He's just doing his job, but the thing is, he keeps ending up in these situations where, it's like he's like the last, the one linchpin between everything going to hell and everything working out, So, and then he goes about the process, with open eyes, knowing that who he works for. These people are not by any means, wonderful people. But the thing is, if there's a certain order that for average everyday people to live, there's a certain order that needs to be maintained. So he goes along with that, as long as it's not, going to get him killed, which is most of the time. But it's like the deal where they're paying for it, But the thing is, I try, in the same respect, I try to weave intrigue and political dynamics and things like that all in there, and especially in my latest one, I have a lot of cultural disgruntlement that's been rising to the surface in this society, and that I even have a section where I have the average citizen, facing this, and still managing to weave it all into the rest of the story. But the thing is, how do you get them to, as you say, the double digit knuckle dragging mouth breather to get to read that? As I hate to say it, it's just the sex and violence, But the thing is, again, even though I use those elements, I don't just throw them in there on gratis. They're part of the story. And
sure.
So, now of course, during the course of the story, if I can make sure that I can make sure that a particular scene can if I can make my audience wince, or get them to do the an out loud ooh, something like that, then I've done my job. But the thing is, that's how you do it. You as you're giving them their medicine, you hold their nose and roll that pill up in that that ball of meat and shove it down their throat. I mean that's pretty much how you're going to do it. I mean anything less and it's it's just going to be, Jerry Springer or reality TV for the rest of it, however long it's going to last.
I agree with you that one of the good gateway drugs to making people read is the comic book. It's a small, it's visual. You can present the kind of ideas that we like to see in them, and some pretty creative ones. And I think that the medium lends itself well to the kids we have today. But there's really only one caveat. Will that habit build, and will that habit lead kids to want to read more? So I guess catching them early, Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. It's just going to be going to be the same way it was with most of us. It's like I'm going to pronounce this correct before the night's over. It's Ceres. You still here?
Yes, Ceres.
Yeah, Ceres. Okay. Yeah, like you said, your gate. It sounds like your gateway was Star Trek. It
was Star Trek, but I also read a lot of comic books as well.
Okay, so that's but for you, it one led to another and another thing and another thing and another thing, and it's some kids are going to get that, other kids are not. I mean, I remember being in college and sitting around in the college dorm common TV room, and have a whole bunch of guys, watching TV. And I remember one time, we had I think there was the Spider-Man TV show, the live action. They were showing a rerun, and it was a bunch of college guys with beer watching Spider-Man. It was a good time for all. And this one brother comes rolling in, looks at the TV and said, "Hey man, why ain't the game on?" And we're like, "You can watch the game in the other room." He says, "Oh man, y'all watching this old science fiction crap, man. Just put the game on." And we were like, "Dude, you can watch a game any time of the year. We're watching Spider-Man. You want to watch Spider-Man? Have a beer. But this guy, he walked out and he was mad, and I know he was one of those guys that will never pick up a science fiction book or never pick up, speculative fiction or anything else. Unless you write it about the game.
And there was a stigma against science fiction for so long, and so many black people. Well, I don't think I knew any other black people who were into science fiction when I was growing up. And when I discovered the internet, I'm like, oh wow, all these other black people like it too. I didn't think it was possible, but the different channels allow you to discover new markets and new niches and new people who are interested in the same things you are.
Well, that's true. Not only that, but in terms of people of color, they weren't going to be around after about 1972, because every single one of those shows didn't have them, or if they did have them, like Star Trek, they usually died. They had a red jersey and they died within about 6 minutes of the before the first commercial. But I think it's also important if we're going to write, we've all caught on to the fact that yes, we're going to write about our people existing in the future, and mattering, not toss away characters or anything like that. So
having a direct impact.
Yes.
Another thing too, thank God for one of my grandmothers. Because when I was growing up, my mom found out that I was reading comic books, and she was like Ceres was saying, there was that stigma about reading comic books and all this other stuff. But my grandmother told her, "He's reading, right?" And she said, "Yeah, we'll leave him alone."
Yeah.
And so, and I hate to say it, especially, well, no, I'm not going to say it on this because this is the internet, and the internet never dies. So, but anyway, I was reading other questionable materials, and my mom was, was like, "Oh my God, why is he reading this stuff?" And my grandmother again said, "He's reading, right?" And each time, my mother would answer yes, and then finally, by the time she started, attending college, in her yet later years, she recognized the value of it, and so she always encouraged me. In fact, and plus I was fortunate to be in that generation, where you would ask a question and your parents would tell you, "Well, go look it up," and so I did. So, in the process of looking things up, I found so many more other, sources of information and sources of knowledge. So the thing is, we as parents and grandparents and all the other stuff, we have to encourage these kids. I mean, we also, it won't kill you to give your niece or nephew a book for Christmas or for their birthday or even some comic books or something like that. And, they're either going to read them or they're not going to read them. But the thing is, we have to encourage them to do so.
Sorry, you get no argument from me.
but I mean, but that's going to have to be part of the process. Because I mean, we're not just like that dude I was talking about with that got bent out of shape. We were watching Spider-Man. That was his mindset. There are just people out there you're just not going to reach them. So you have to pull a Thaddeus and have to say forget them and push forward. And those kids you will reach them. And the cool thing is they'll be those kids that we do reach will be just like us. They'll probably be on their version of a internet radio program in their time. And they'll be pushing the same thing, and they'll be saying the same things we are. Well, these kids aren't reading today. We got to help them. So I mean, that's how it's going to work.
Comments? Well, hold on. Just before we say anything else,
still there?
You're listening to Genesis Science Fiction Radio, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is our February 1st edition. Oh, happy Black History Month to everybody here. And I'm glad we still have Black history, and it looks like we're going to even make more Black history. So it's good that the shop is still open and we're still churning it out. I'm not sure exactly when we started, so I don't know how much time we have left. Could somebody clue me in?
We have about 5 minutes.
Okay. Does anybody have any closing remarks they would like to make for this episode? Oh, no, stop. Don't all talk at once.
I would like to thank Black Science Fiction Radio for having me as a guest. I enjoyed myself and I learned a lot as well.
I'm sorry, I muted myself to keep the sound level down, and I started talking. And like, okay, there's no sound coming out because I've muted myself. I think it has been a really great show. One of the issues that we have to also remember, I don't know if Jarvis is on, but to remember to post on Cerese's information regarding her upcoming launch of her book, also the convention in Pittsburgh, where she's going to be launching her book, COG. And I know for the last second, Cerise, if you could, give us all your information again so that we have that handy and available before it goes up on the site.
I can be reached on Facebook at Ceres Wright, and my website is www.cereswright.com.
All right, I'll give it back to you, William.
Oh, well, I apologize for my tardiness, but I have to do something physical every week. Otherwise, I've got the face for radio, and the other thing is, during nice weather when I go to the beach, I try to lie out, and some environmentalist always comes and hollers, save him, and tries to roll me back in the water. So excuse me for being late. I'm going to listen to the podcast of this as soon as it's up so I could see what I missed earlier. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating because this is kind of a very, very cool place to hang out on Friday evenings. There's always interesting people. There's always an interesting dialogue between everybody. I would also like to thank Jarvis for putting this together because this is not an inconsiderable task, and it also is something that took a good deal of creativity that didn't exist before he brought it to the table. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank everybody and remind everybody that next Friday please tell your friends, log on, listen, dial in, because the more the merrier. This is a community endeavor, and the more people who are in the community, I think the better off we are. And we also want to increase the reach of this radio show and get more people to sign up for BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website so that we can increase our scope. I think that about covers it. What do you think, Jarvis?
Hey, that was perfect.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And this concludes tonight's show. And for those people who are listening to the podcast, you're going to have to dial in, because sometimes what happens after we stop recording is even wilder than what we have on the show. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night.
All right.
Night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
All righty.